So this section is going to be about role-based access control, all right, or RBAC. Now RBAC's been around a long time, and so we have all seen it in one format or another, but RBAC or RBAC has been around for a very, very long time. Okay, and so that's going to be one of the things that we talk about. We've done this with RBAC for a long time. Roles. Once upon a time, we'd go ahead and we hire a user named Fred, all right, and we'd want Fred to be able to do our backups, right? And so we'd go ahead and we give him all the permissions to do backup, and everything was great. He'd quit, we'd hire Barney, and we hired Barney. If we want him to do backups, we would have to go ahead and give Barney all those permissions. Well, it became kind of a pain to go ahead and every time we had a change in personnel, to have to assign those permissions to a specific person. Or if we had multiple people doing backup, to assign those exact same permission to the same person. And this is really where the idea of roles come from. All right? A role is simply going to be a collection of permissions. All right? A role is simply going to be a collection of permissions. And so what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to create a role, a collection of permissions. We'll be able to create a user and assign that role to a user to give them those permissions in our UCS environment. So let's take a look at how we create a user in our UCS environment. So here I am. I'm looking at my UCS. I'm going to be under the Admin tab. All right. Under the Admin tab, I filtered down to only see User Management under the Admin tab. And then I see I have my locally authenticated users. I'm going to right-click. Well, I can see I currently have one user right now, Admin. Password strength check, make sure we have strong passwords, which is kind of frustrating sometimes when you're trying to be quick and create a user and it requires a long password. And our password policy. I'm going to right-click and create a new user. When I create a new user, I'm going to notice a couple things. First of all, I have the basic information I would expect in creating a user. And that really being where I have I create the login ID, give him his name. So I'll create a user here called John. And then I can see my other information. Now most of that information is kind of typical, right? First name, last name, email, phone, great. Account status. Okay, that's kind of handy here. So if somebody goes ahead and they leave or they get moved to a different department or whatever, and they go on temporary, we can make it inactive. Another one that's handy is account expires. This is particularly handy if you have consultants coming in. You know, a consultant's coming in, it's going to be there for 60 days. Well, I can automatically have his account expire at the end of that 60 days. But this creates the user John. Now there's a special role called read only. The read-only role always is in effect, right? No matter what. You can't get rid of it. You can't undo it. When you create a user, they always have read-only. But notice we have additional roles, all right? And our additional roles, I can give them admin, network operations. These are the built-in roles, all right? These are the ones that come with UCS. And so if I select network, all right, that will give them network permissions throughout the entire environment. I'll go ahead and click OK. And I've created the user John who has permissions throughout our environment. All right, so that's pretty slick. And we have that ability to create users and give them roles. But we also can create our own roles. If I click on roles, I can see the built-in roles. All right, but I'm going to right-click and create a role. Right-click, I'm going to create a custom role. I'm going to try to create a custom role. All right. So the create role is going to bring up a dialog box. Now this dialog box will be how I actually create a custom role as opposed to using one of the ones that are already built in. So maybe I have a QoS guy. I want a guy to go ahead and be the QoS dude. I can go through, give him explicit privileges. Remember, a role is simply a collection of privileges. So I can say, hey, I want him to have maybe I want to have the external LAN QoS and SAN QoS, and that's it. And I can give them explicit privileges. Let's go down and click OK. Now this role doesn't do anything until it's actually assigned to a user. So we have to assign it to a user. So I'm going to go back to my user John. And for my user John, I'm going to select the role now that I just created called QoS dude. So this is how we can assign permissions globally. But we know we might have a pretty big environment where we might have maybe some servers for one department, some servers for another department. How can we actually manage that type of environment where we have those different types of servers? Well, fortunately, we have another tool. The other tool that we have, so far we've talked about roles. All right, we've talked about users. The next is going to be something called organizations. With organizations, we're going to be able to take our structure, our hierarchy, and kind of group things, organize things. Like you create a directory tree in your file system to organize your files. Well, we can create an organization tree inside of UCS for organizing our environment. Now, I first noticed this in the UCS environment. I'm going to go into the Servers tab, and I see I have servers. I see it says root and then sub-organizations. I'm going to create a sub-organization by right-clicking, saying Create Organization, and I'm going to create one called Marketing, and I'll click OK. All right, and I'll go ahead and I'll create another one called Sales. Now what I have the ability to do is, I see I already have a couple other existing organizations there, is when I go to create an object, I can create that object, instead of creating it under root, which is the default location where everything's normally created under root, I can create it specifically under an organization tree. All right, so I can create an object. And what we notice is this will spread throughout. When I go under policies, if I look under policies and I look at, or let's go under templates, I can see all these organizations, and they'll spread out. If I look under LAN, all right, and I can see under LAN that I also have these sub-organizations. All right. I'd have to go down to see them more, where I can see all these different sub-organizations. All right, they spread out across the environment, excluding the physical gear. The physical gear is not affected by organizations, but the servers, LAN, SAN tabs are all affected by organizations. So I can put different objects, I can put different service profiles, different templates, different policies into different organizational units. You're like, well, okay, that's nice for organizing it, but how can I control permissions? Well, that's really where our next magic component comes in here, is the next thing that really is going to make a difference is going to be something called a locale. And locale is probably one of those that we're maybe not as used to. All right, and the idea, what we want to be able to do is to give people permission over certain organizations or certain parts of that organizational tree. Now, you might be thinking, well, why don't I just go ahead and assign it to the tree? Well, they chose a little different structure to give us some flexibility. So say, for example, I went ahead and I hired somebody to be in charge of sales and marketing. And I wanted them to have permission just over the organization sales and the organization marketing and nothing else. How do I accomplish that? Well, the way that I accomplish that is that I go under my admin, and under admin, I see I have something called locales. I right-click, I'm going to say Create Locale. When I create this locale, all right, I'll give it a name. We'll call this Sales Marketing. I then specify which organization units are included in this. And so I'm going to select both the sales and the marketing. So I open up my organizations, open up root, and then I see my sales and marketing located there. I'm going to go ahead. This is one of the few times in UCS we have any animation, right? So let's see what happens here. We go woof, a little bit of animation, and let's bring in marketing. Marketing, woof. And now we see, whoops, I didn't get marketing. We'll bring marketing over. All right, so now we have sales and marketing, those organizational units under this particular locale. So a locale is a collection of those organizational units. I can go back to my user John, and I can use a locale to restrict where that user has permissions in my organizational tree. So if I have a user that I want him to only have permission for the sales and marketing, by default he has permissions over this whole thing, right? And the whole entire environment, but I can restrict that by going under like sales and marketing here. and say, hey, this user only has permission for that environment. My remote desktop's being a little grumpy today. There it goes. And I'll click Save Changes. So now John has the, what does he have? Well, he's assigned the roles, QoS dude. He's assigned not only QoS dude, but network, as well as always the read-only. All right, that's the default role we can't remove. Where can he execute? Where does he have those privileges? Well, he has those privileges in the locations defined by the locale called sales marketing, which are those two organizational units. So those are kind of the basic components. When we look at RBAC, and we start saying, hey, you know, what really makes up RBAC? There's only really a few components, right? We know we have users, all right? We create our users just like we typically do. We have roles, all right? We know roles are just a collection of privileges, all right? And then we say, okay, great, what else do we have? We have locales, which are a collection of organizations. Okay. And that's really all there is to using RBAC inside our Cisco UCS environment.